Welcome to the Book Binge. I am your host, King Crusoe. You can call me KC, and today we are talking about some books that I really enjoyed reading at one point or another, but do not necessarily intend to reread. Just to be clear, right at the beginning of this video, and to add a little bit of clarification, the title is minorly clickbaity, but not entirely. Some of these books I would not really have any actual qualms with rereading personally, but I'm choosing to put on this list because I really do not plan to. I would be surprised if I chose to do that. Some of these books I could in fact see myself rereading at some point, but again, I would be kind of surprised if it ended up ever happening. And a couple of these books I don't necessarily think love, quote unquote, is the right term for them, even though I still enjoyed them to a significant degree, but that title was obviously the easiest way to format this video. But in either case, these are basically ordered in, an approximate order of likelihood to be reread, where the later appearing books in this list are less likely to be read than the earlier appearing ones. So let's talk about the honorable mentions. Like I said, the first one of these is definitely a little bit of a technicality, and that is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. And the reason why this is a technicality is because Wuthering Heights is a book that I really loved while I was reading it, most of the time while I was reading it, and then I apparently still rated it pretty highly on Goodreads, but over time I've come to not love this book, actually. I definitely don't love it anymore. The more time that passed, especially that first year after I first read Wuthering Heights, the less fondly I thought of it and the more annoyed I was about some of the things that it was doing compared to what I wanted it to do, even though I really enjoyed a lot of the tone the first time, like I said, while I was reading it. As a result, I will likely never reread Wuthering Heights. It is true that I technically used to love, but as a result I probably won't ever reread it. Maybe I will, now knowing what it is actually doing, and might take it a little bit slower, because I think plowing right through that was maybe a little bit of the reason why I came to not like it as much in the end. But either way, that is the technicality honorable mention. And then two true honorable mentions, which we'll just briefly go through here. The first one of these is Dune by Frank Herbert, a book that I enjoyed a lot, but I got what I wanted out of it. I don't feel too super inclined to reread it. However, I do someday think that I'll probably read Dune Messiah and Children of Dune and God Emperor of Dune. If I ever read those three sequels, I will of course reread Dune before I get to them, but at this point I'm not entirely sure that I will do that, or if I do, it'll be not anytime anywhere soon. I definitely don't feel any urgency to do that. I enjoyed Dune as a book for what it was quite a bit, but like I said, I got what I wanted out of it, so I'm not sure that my chances of rereading it, like I said, anytime soon, it's pretty low. And then the other honorable mention is Endurance, Shackleton's Incredible Voyage, which is definitely not a hard set never. I will never reread this book, hence why it's an honorable mention in this case. It's just not super likely to be reread. I don't think I'll ever, think on a whim oh, I kind of want to reread Endurance, because again, it's a situation of, I really liked this. It's an incredible book. I recommend this to basically everybody. It's really enjoyable, but I don't see myself feeling like I need to reread it. If I were to reread it, it would most likely be in a sense of reading it with somebody else, probably children at some point in the future, or something along those lines, but not necessarily a book that I look at and think, I might want to reread that someday. I just don't really feel that urge, and I don't think that will change. So now we're going to move on to the actual list and start off with the bottom handful of things. I have this stack a little bit upside down from what it should be. The first one of these books is just one of the books of this collection, that is Rage by Stephen King. One of the two books out of this collection specifically that I have read, and I've technically read both Rage and The Long Walk twice at this point. I reread Rage recently to be able to review it and talk about it in a little bit better context with Stephen King's other material that I have read, and because I'm reading his stuff in approximate publication order like I said, approximate. And so I just decided to put Rage, and I put Long Walk into that list as well. But Rage is a book that, now that I have read it twice, I do know pretty firmly where I sit with it. I think it's a good book. I think people overstate the issues with it. I think it is a solid book, and if you're really reading it critically, you're actually probably going to come to the opposite conclusion than the worry that it was about. It's a book that I reviewed, so if you want to check out more of my personal thoughts about it, I really like Rage a good bit, but like I said, I've read it twice. I definitely get the picture by now, and I appreciate it. I think that the book it's not underrated, actually, because if I check Goodreads, the average rating is pretty high, but I do think it's a little bit overly maligned in the public eye, kind of like what I was suggesting. But because I have read Rage 2 times at this point, I highly doubt I'll ever decide to read it again, when even now I've only read like 13, 14 Stephen King books or something like that at this point. There's several other Stephen King books that I would prefer to reread, so if I want to reread a King book, it's not going to be Rage, so that is why that is on the list. Next up, we have At Night All Blood is Black by David Diop, this is a fantastic story. There's some weirdness about it, and this is one that was so enjoyable and intriguing and thought-provoking specifically that I ended up doing a miscellaneous reading diary. This was the first book outside of The Wheel of Time that I ever did any spoiler talk for, and I really enjoyed being able to do that. So, like, I recommend this book for its thought-provoking nature, and because it's more literary. For a book published so recently, the dedication to that literary element is so appreciated. Like, I respect this book a ton, and maybe at some point in the future, I could maybe see myself rereading this, but I just don't feel like I need to. I got some pretty good stuff out of it. This is a book that I'd be more likely to like watch or read commentary and discussion about, analytical discussion about it, as opposed to rereading the book itself, even though it's really short. So that's where I fall with that. I don't think I'll ever reread it, but I'm not necessarily cutting out the possibility. It's just not likely at all. The next one of these entries might ruffle a few feathers a bit. That is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. And the reason why this book I don't think I'll ever reread is because I have The Martian. I might have I know I have a slightly unpopular opinion here in loving The Martian more than Project Hail Mary. I just kind of found myself not as engaged with Ryland Grace as a narrator, and there were a couple of other particular decisions that Andy Weir made on the writing front that bothered me about Project Hail Mary, as opposed to something like The Martian, where I just completely love everything about that book. I haven't reread The Martian in a long time, but I have read it a few times, so I know how I feel about that book. Project Hail Mary, it's like, if I want to read that kind of story, I'm just going to read The Martian again. And I know that Project Hail Mary has something to it that The Martian doesn't. That was honestly the best part about the book. Definitely made it worth reading. But between like these two honestly very similar books with very similar narration and narrators, I'm going to read The Martian every single time. I do not see myself ever picking up Project Hail Mary again, unless I specifically want that one particular element that I didn't get in, or that The Martian doesn't offer. But who knows? The movie for Project Hail Mary comes out early next year, so there's a good chance that if I want that, I'll just watch the movie, but we'll see how good it is, how good of an adaptation it is. If it's anything like The Martian, I'll really love that adaptation, so we'll see what happens. But I don't really plan to reread Project Hail Mary. It's not something that I see myself doing. Next up is a book that I have actually already reread once and read twice. Did this last year. This was, however the timing goes, I don't even know. It's been a while. No Country for Old Men by Cormac McCarthy was a story that I really enjoy, despite my qualms with Cormac McCarthy's writing style and, all the technicalities around that. As a story and structurally, the way that certain things are revealed and put to page in No Country for Old Men, at least doing it mostly audio for this one. I really enjoyed being able to experience that story. I did experience it twice and was able to appreciate it for different reasons both times. So I'm actually glad that I did get to this one twice, because I enjoyed it a lot the first time and I got to reappreciate it from a new angle the second time. But I don't see myself rereading this again. I think, well, actually, that's a lie. There's plenty of McCarthy that I could see myself rereading, like the Border trilogy. I could see myself rereading just to be able to appreciate all the pretty horses, and hopefully Cities of the Plain more than I did the first time, and also just to re-experience The Crossing, because I really loved that book. And I definitely, absolutely 100% plan to reread Passenger and Stella Maris at some point in the future and do like a dedicated immersive reading experience for those, because that was just incredible. I loved those books. But outside of those, I don't think I see myself rereading any other McCarthy again, because I just don't feel like I need to, and none of them I feel like would be really worth the time. And No Country for Old Men at this point, now that I have experienced it twice, I feel like that's pretty much the case for this book as well. If I'm going to experience the story again, I'm going to actually bother to watch the movie like I should have when I read the book the first time, because I hear nothing but really amazing things for the movie, so I doubt that I wouldn't love it, especially since I actually enjoyed the story. But I've heard from a lot of people that it takes the material of the book and makes it even better. So I'm looking forward to watching it at some point. I don't need to reread it again, though. Next up is The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones, and this is going to be a minor hot take just because there's a ton of people that I know personally who think this book is terrible. I thought it was great, but there are some weird things about it and some other aspects to it that I just don't feel like I need to read again. Particularly part 3 was just kind of out there, and although like it rounded itself into the thematic concept of the story really well, actually, there's just a lot of decisions in part 3 in particular that's just like, but why though? That's a little bit odd. And the book is quite odd, I will grant it that. If you really hate basketball, you'll probably not enjoy this, because there's several basketball scenes in here that are thematically relevant. I would say they're good for this book, but maybe not good for people who don't like basketball. But there's just a lot about this experience that I really liked. I think The Only Good Indians is probably my favorite Stephen Graham Jones thing that I've read so far. And I just really liked it. The only other thing that might compare is Night of the Mannequins, but the reason why Night of the Mannequins is not on this list is because I do want to reread that. This one I just don't feel like I need to. I definitely got what I wanted out of it, so yeah, that's why it is on the list. Next up in slot number 5 is Wheel of Time, Book 5, The Fires of Heaven. And you're going to ask me, why do I specify this one? Well, it's because Fires of Heaven is tied for, at this point, my favorite Wheel of Time book. At the time that I'm recording this, I've only read through book 10, Crossroads of Twilight. So out of those 10 books, plus New Spring, by the way, I have read New Spring, so technically those 11 books, Fires of Heaven and The Dragon Reborn are my favorite ones. So why did I specify Fires of Heaven and not Dragon Reborn? Well, that one is pretty easy, because I do not plan to reread the entirety of Wheel of Time. Like, even if these last, I guess, 4 books from 11 through 14 are all incredible, I'm not going to reread the entirety of Wheel of Time, because it is too much, and that would be honestly a waste of time. I would not get enough out of a reread of Wheel of Time to justify the amount of time that it would take, and also just the amount of annoyance that just slight little things in plenty of the books give me. But I would not necessarily count out rereading the first 3 books. I loved these first 3 books so much, and they make a good enough closed loop by themselves that I could maybe see myself rereading those 3 in the future, and thus, like, I loved all 3 of those books, but especially Dragon Reborn. Maybe I would read that someday. I don't know, but I'm definitely not going to reread Fires of Heaven, because I'm not going to reread The Shadow Rising just to reread The Fires of Heaven, and I wouldn't reread the rest of the books just to get to this again. I can be reasonably confident that no matter how much I love those books, I'm not going to find it worth rereading the entire series just to get to them again. That would be absolutely bonkers. And if they were that good, I just can't believe that they would be that good, because that would be, I don't know, it's unrealistic for my expectations of them to end up. It's unrealistic for them to meet that high of a bar, in my opinion. Anyway, moving on to book number 4, the book that I get my channel's namesake from, and the review of this book that I have on this channel actually explains where I got the name King Crusoe from. It's a fun story, so if you want to check that out, I recommend it. Robinson Crusoe is a story that I enjoyed, and definitely one of the earliest novels. This and like Don Quixote are some of the earliest like modern ideas of what we consider the novel to be, and Robinson Crusoe is solid, but it is also a little bit boring in just kind of the way that things are told and what actually happens in it. There's not quite enough going on to really keep you there the entire way. Like, it's not much more than 200 pages. It's only like 220 pages long. But it feels a little bit longer than that. When I read it, it definitely felt more like 300 or 350 pages. That's how slow it could be at times. But it's a book that I respect and that I hold in my heart personally because of where I got my channel name from and how that entire, like, the coincidence of that story comes about. So this is a book that's like, would I say I loved Robinson Crusoe? Not necessarily, but I do have that attachment to it because of my channel name, and it's a book that I don't ever plan to reread, so that's why it's on this list. Next up is going to be a pretty similar situation insofar as it being a classic book. That is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne, a book that is really good, and for the tone and the vibes of it, incredible. There's a lot about this book that definitely made it worth reading, especially like worth finishing when I actually finished it, I believe January 2023, if I'm not mistaken, because back in like 8th grade, I had read the first half of this very translation and then never circled back around to it, despite intending to for a very long time. 2023 was when I finally finished it, and I was like, yeah, that was totally worth experiencing. I think I rated this 5 stars on Goodreads. It's like a 4.5 rounded up, where that 1.5 star detractor is mostly just all the biological terms, you know, all the words that are like, okay, you're selling the tone, but I don't need all of this stuff in my head. You could just be telling the story right now. I loved the book. I loved the vibe of it. I loved the tone. But it's not one that I feel like I need to reread. I read the first half of the book technically twice, but I got definitely for sure what I wanted from the book, and that is as much as I could ask for. But now we're coming up to the 2 books on this list that, well, I guess honestly 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea would be the third one that's like, I do not ever plan to reread that. Like, I'd be very surprised if I ever reread that one. But these top 2 books were like the books that came to my brain when I thought of, I should do a video on books that I really liked that I don't plan to reread. These were the 2 books that came to my head immediately that I knew were like, yeah, those are going on the list, top of the list, basically. I had to peruse my bookshelves and stuff to like actually determine what other books might be applicable for this list and kind of narrow things down and justify them in different ways. But these 2 were the ones that were super easy. Number 2 is Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace. If you want any of the detail of what I thought about this book, I actually haven't technically done a review of this book. It's the one book that I've read at this point that I have not reviewed and that I have not like prepared a review for to come out soon, which is kind of a problem because I started writing that review a very long time ago at this point and have not circled back around to it, which is, you know, I don't love that about myself either, but if you want to know how I felt about this in a spoiler-free context, there's a significant chunk of the 5th reading diary that I did for this that explains my entire spoiler-free thoughts. Like, if you want the review, it's basically the beginning of that video. I should do a review of this at some point, but short review here. Basically, the reason why is because Infinite Jest has several sections that are incredible. Some of my favorite things in fiction come from Infinite Jest, but there's so much of it that was just so much, really no other way to put it, that makes it hard to really justify, especially since no insignificant chunk of this book, a solid chunk of it, doesn't even exist. Like, there's no small part of the main story of this book that is implied and put into the story implicatively. Like I said, it's implied. It's not even on the page, where it's like there's no proper climax to the book, and therefore no real resolution, because it's that resolution is more hinting at stuff than it is actually resolving anything. It's just a really complicated affair where, like, my personal reading experience, I was very salty by the time I finished it because of some of those things, like the lack of an ending, for example. Like an abject lack of ending. The ending is not on the page, very explicitly so. So that really bothered me, but I can't deny just how much I loved certain sections of the book at that. So the reason why this is on the list is because I'm not going to read this entire experience again. There might be a couple sections of this that I might go and try to find and search out, be like, I kind of want to reread that specific thing because that section was awesome. But the entire book, no, I'm not going to read the entire book again. Absolutely not. That would not be worth my brain power at all. But number one on this list was the very first book that popped in my head for this list, and was the obvious answer for me. Like, what's one book that I love but I will never reread? It is American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis. The reason why is because the tone and the humor and being in the mind of Patrick Bateman for this book was incredible. It was brilliant. I loved it so much. I had such an enjoyable time being able to experience that. But because of the details, the things that sell the tone, I loved the tone, but the things that sell the tone, like the details of clothes and technical details of other random stuff, Patrick Bateman's fixation on certain things, the book is kind of boring. If somebody wanted to criticize American Psycho and say this is an absurdly boring book, I would tell you you're not wrong. The back half is not quite as much of that as the first half is, for sure. Back half actually starts getting really brutal very quickly, and at many more points than the first half does. But there's a lot of sequences of this book that are just like, I could see exactly how somebody might be miserable with them. And there were even a couple sequences that I was kind of miserable with while reading it, despite how much it sold the tone of the book. This is like the definition of a 4 out of 5 star masterpiece, where I could not ever justify rating this 5 out of 5 because there are issues, but those issues kind of sell what the book is doing at the same time. So it's just a book that I really love. I put it on my favorite books of all time list back in, what was it, the last week of May or something? Can't remember where exactly on the list it was, somewhere like around 11 or something like that. So it's a book I loved. It's one of my favorites. Never going to reread this. I realize that the film seems to actually be surprisingly faithful. I haven't watched the film in its entirety yet, which is crazy to me. I need to do that. But based off of how faithful some of the scenes that I know exist in that book are some of the scenes in that movie are to their book counterparts, I'm like, I should watch that movie. I'm very likely to really enjoy that movie, and I'm more likely to watch that movie if I ever want to experience American Psycho again, because, you know, you have to cut out all of the internal narration stuff that makes the book a little bit difficult to read at times. So, yeah, that is the one book that I love that I will never ever reread at all, period. Like, it's not going to happen. But there you have the list entire. If you have any books personally that you love but have no plans to reread, let me know in the comments below. I know I did a video a while back talking about how many people reread and what the reasons for rereading are, and there were no small amount of people who talked about how they just don't reread because there's not enough time to read all the books you want to read in the first place. Why spend time rereading? But for you people who are like me and like definitely feel the urge to reread things you enjoy just because you really enjoyed it and because you want to experience it again for whatever reasons that may be, what are some books that you really liked but will never reread? I would be super curious to know. For now, I've been your host, King Crusoe. You can call me KC, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.